Welcome to Stormwoods, the only woods I know of where you need an invitation to visit. The only woods I know of where somewhere there is always a storm raging. The only woods I know of where the deeper into the forest you go, the larger and stranger the trees and plants, the larger and stranger the animals, the smaller and smaller the path becomes. The only woods I know of where you need to follow these specific rules. No chainsaws or axes of any kind. Don't visit unless invited by a resident or by Hecate herself. Leave out offerings for the denizens of the woods. If you hear dogs barking, expect a visit from Hecate. Don't stray from the path unless you are a torchbearer or a keeper of the woods, just to name a few. And if Stormwoods ends up liking you, it will often ask you for a favor. Those favors are how I ended up spending time in Carpe Noctem, a town with rules of its own. Hello, my friend. I don't have very much interesting to talk about today because I chose not to go on this fact-finding expedition with the coven members. For one big reason. I told you before that 4 of the 5 of them were able to make it the pathway to my house. Well, the 5th one, Augustina Gulley, who does not go by August, does not go by Tina, but is always Augustina. Always Augustina. There's something weird about a person who doesn't have a nickname. Now, I know as a Gabriella called Gabe, that is probably some prejudice on my part. But between "you must call me Augustina" and the fact that the path didn't work, I felt like Hecate was telling us not to trust this woman. If she couldn't make it to the meeting where we discussed all of this, why would we be trusting her? But they wanted to trust her because they have known her for years. I am the outsider here. And I talked it over with Eli, as I do most things, and he agreed with me. And part of the reason I talk things over with him like that, I mean, A, he's my husband, of course I'm going to, but also he is very good at checking me when I'm being a little too judgmental, a little too out there. And not like in a controlling way, but just in a, well, you might be right, but I can see how it comes off this way or this way. So I told him my thoughts on it, and he was like, no, if the path didn't let her get here, then no. He's like, we were told by a goddess what the rules are and why somebody would walk that path and then get dumped back out again. And apparently, we found out later, Augustina walked on that path for several hours before she was dumped back out. The path not only didn't bring her here, it diverted her from going anywhere for the duration of the meeting, basically. By the time the rest of the group got back to the parking lot, she had arrived like minutes before. She hadn't even gotten into her car yet. Like, that's how quickly it was, because she was, I guess, one of the drivers. I don't know. They told me who drove, and I forgot pretty much immediately. Um, but they're lucky I'm keeping names straight, to be honest, because they've thrown a lot at me very, very quickly, and they're new people, you know. And when it comes to new people, I am going to trust me over them. But moreover, I am going to trust the protections in place because here's the thing, as far as the path goes, that's just entry level protection from Hecate. I have other protections on my house too, including several which are if you're trying to find it and you don't have good intentions, you don't find the house. So between the path diverting her and my own protections letting me know this is somebody who I should not trust, I'm going with my magic. I'm going with Hecate's magic over what the rest of the group considers to be common sense. Oh no, we've known her for years. Okay, cool, cool. Like, that doesn't mean shit to me because I've known all of you for a blink. So I think it disappointed everybody, but I basically said, look, if we are going to be doing this endeavor and keeping Augustina in the loop, then it is probably best that you guys leave me out of the loop. And, if you need any support or, you get into trouble when you go, I will be a backup call to ride into the rescue. But I think if we go, anything that we share with her is not information that should be shared. Like we're going in there to see if we can find a missing person. If Augustina cannot be trusted, then she could tip them off. She could be in league with them. I know I sound crazy. I know. This isn't normal people stuff, but if you're doing something serious, you have to take it seriously. And in my mind, this is doing something serious, and they may be taking it seriously, but I am not going to trust somebody who couldn't even get to my house. Like, you're not able to visit my highly protected sanctuary. I'm not going into Carpe Noctem with you, which maybe they're vampires, maybe they're just very, very dedicated LARPers, but regardless, I'm pretty sure they kidnapped somebody. Now, here's the other thing. I also don't know this Maddie Tremaine. I don't know her from anybody, but there is always the possibility she's there willingly. Maybe what I saw was not her being forced into a car, but a lover's spat. I don't know. So, too many unknowns make it a no-go. And Eli pretty much agreed with me. Now, Eli is helping me come up with a plan where we just go visit Carpe Noctem on our own sometime. And I don't tell the coven about it. And I do see if I can see the same stuff, and we're going to treat it like we're going into the fairy realm. We're not going to eat anything. We're not going to drink anything unless we have brought it ourselves. Simply because the food we got from that restaurant really was a little too sleep-inducing. And Addison told me that they had never had that experience, but they'd also never gone in a group that was less than 4 or 5 people. Um, and, you know, there are people who have gone to Carpe Noctem alone or in pairs who feel like they got very drunk very quickly and lost time. They have little gaps in their memory. And that's just not acceptable for me. That's not acceptable for Eli. That's not something we want to do. So we are trying to come up with a way to visit Carpe Noctem safely. And one of those ways includes not eating any food. Luckily, they have a lot of places to shop. And Eli hates bars, but they have more than their fair share of bars. I guess if you're open all night, bars are kind of your go-to. But I would think that, if you were open during the nighttime, you'd just treat nighttime the way daytime's treated, like, but I am not pretending to be a vampire or understand those who do pretend to be vampires, so who knows? I will say that Addison has decided to keep me in the loop about what they have done. Um, I did not get a call to come get them when they planned to go, and their visit was completely uneventful. And maybe it was uneventful because Maddie Tremaine isn't there. Maybe it was uneventful because Augustina gave them a heads up. Hey, I'm bringing a group of people with me that are looking for this person. And maybe Augustina is not like in league with the vampires untrustworthy. Maybe she's just, regular everyday untrustworthy. Just because she didn't make it here, like the forest didn't eat her. There are some people who get on that path and never get off. Oh yeah, I found a work journal from the previous occupant of the tower. And it's not like I'm reading somebody's personal information. Well, I mean, I am, but on the front of the journal it says, for the next watcher of the woods, for the next keeper of the woods. Apparently sometimes the person's called a watcher of the woods, sometimes they're called a keeper of the woods. And we are pretty certain Eli's the watcher and I'm the keeper in this context. So we took turns while we were working in the tower, watching the woods, uh, reading it. And, she talked about two different instances where she invited somebody that she had just met in town to come visit. And not only did they never get to her house, but they just went missing. Like, they walked into the pathway of the woods because apparently she had cameras set up at the mailboxes. I am not given an explanation as to why she had a camera set up at the mailbox, but my guess is she was probably trying to watch when packages came, that sort of thing, because they just leave the packages on the mailboxes. Because, like I said, they're like key to open mailboxes, only really, really large. And apparently, she would get very large packages that would just be left on top of the mailboxes. And she came from a city, so she didn't want anything stolen. So, anyway, um, but the camera showed the person at, the right time getting onto the path, and then they just never came out again. To the extent that with these two instances, she had to call police. She had to get the authorities involved, and the authorities who came, um, were basically from the county. You know how there's like township, local police, and then there's like the sheriff, which is county by county. At least in Illinois, that's how it works. This was the county. The county cops came and said that this happens kind of frequently, you know. More than likely, she's not going to hear from that person again. And she said they were very, very nice about it and very, very sympathetic about it, but they were also a little almost blasé about it. Like, oh yeah, this is just what happens. We lose people in these woods all the time. And this is somebody she was hoping to get to know as a friend, so she was pretty upset. Her name, by the way, is so cool. She is Zelda Mantlethorpe. And one of the things I have to say about this area and the people around here is they all seem to have incredibly witchy names. My name is an angelic name, and it's not that witches don't necessarily work with angels, but it's not witchy so much as it's angelic. So I'm always jealous of the Addison Ravens and the Zelda Mantlethorpes because it's like, oh, your parents knew when you came out you were going to be a witch. That's super cool. Anyway, uh, name envy aside, Eli assures me Gabe is a cool name, so what am I going to do? Anyway, Zelda's journal talks about how upsetting that incident was. And she had no, it was a few years before she invited somebody else because she didn't want that to happen again. And, I'm sort of wondering, like, did did you, I would have, after the first disappearance, maybe asked Hecate, hey, I'm thinking of inviting this person over. Will they make it to my house? But one of the things Eli said is the impression he gets is if somebody goes missing in the woods, it's for one of two reasons. One, they probably shouldn't be out among society, and Hecate and or her horde are just removing them from a society they would otherwise harm. He's like, that's the good version. The or the bad version rather. The good version is maybe these are lost souls looking for a place to belong and they get absorbed into Hecate and her horde. You know, there's that old myth of Hecuba being turned into, when I originally heard the myth, it was Hecuba was turned into a black cat that joined Hecate. Later, it seems other myths have said that Hecuba turned into a dog that joined Hecate. And Hecate and dogs, peanut butter and jelly, basically. They go hand in hand. But black cats are also associated with Hecate, and I always heard that Hecuba was the black cat. Now, other myths I've read recently name somebody else as the black cat and Hecuba as the she-dog. Um, but regardless, there's at least two different instances of people being taken in and cared for by Hecate. Hecuba being the most notable. Mother of Cassandra, cursed by Apollo. Yeah. And poor Cassandra. It must be so hard to have visions that no one believes. But I find her very, very sympathetic because there are so many times, like, you and I both know that there are some people who are going to screw you over no matter what. And you and I have both had the experience where we meet somebody, everybody else loves them, and we're like, yeah, wait and see. And that's how I feel about Augustina. And I'm not going to go into that in depth with her friends because I'm not stupid. I'm the new person here. I am the outsider and saying, hey, you can't trust this person who is a member of your coven and has been for years and years and years. Listen to me, who you met 2 minutes ago. That's not going to happen. Especially when I've had people I've been friends with for years and we meet a new person and I say we should not trust them and they think, oh, you're just too judgmental. Oh, and don't listen to me. And like, a few years later, I'm like, this is what I was saying. You know me. I love a good I told you so. But my point, getting back to that, is Hecate does take in lost souls. Hecate does take people in. And so, maybe the people that went on this path were evil and got eaten by the horde. Maybe the people on this path were good and decent and no longer needed to be in the world and were taken in by the horde in a, one of us sort of way. Um, Hecate, if nothing else, she takes people who are in liminal space in, you know? So think about it. People who, in Hecuba's case, she was enslaved by Odysseus after the fall of Troy. Um, and or other bad fates after the fall of Troy. The fall of Troy left her with no home, with no place to be. So she was living in liminal space. She was living in an in-between place. She was living somewhere where she did not have a home. Hecate, being of liminal spaces, takes those people in. So, obviously I agree with Eli. I usually do. That, one of two things could happen. And Zelda later on in the journal kind of confirms that. Um, she said looking at the footage, she knew that one of these people who was gentleman she had invited over who was of a witchy bent, they were going to make magic bread together. I don't think that's a euphemism. I think they were actually going to bake something, but I don't know. Eli now, anytime he wants to be romantic, says, "Hey, do you want to make some magical bread?" So anyway, that's probably not funny to you, but it's funny to me. Eli cracks me up. But anyway, um, but the other person, also a gentleman, but a much, much older one. Zelda said that the first gentleman that disappeared was about her age. I have no idea what age that is. And the journal that we've read so far has not given any indication what age that is. But the second gentleman was much younger. She said probably late teens, early 20s. And she basically invited that person over because she figured they definitely had a vehicle so they could get there. She wanted to just feed him. Like, and this was definitely not something that could be confused as a making magical bread moment. She was making a huge vat of soup, um, apparently a very, very hearty stew-like soup, and was going to just have him stay for a night or two and give him food. Um, and he never showed up. So she thinks the first one kind of got eaten by the forest, you know. Sarah Wild, Storm Woods, went out of their way to make sure he found trouble because there was something about the video. And again, I wish we had the footage so I could see it. There was something about the video, according to Zelda, where he seemed almost furtive when he decided to get on the path. She didn't give me any names. I could probably go through missing persons, but if what the cops told her is true, missing persons might be a huge swath of information to go through. Because if people go missing every year, and, people implies more than one, um, to the fact that the cops are mostly bored of it, like it's not notable to them, um, more than likely that's going to be a very long list of missing persons. Missing people? Missing persons. One of those, whichever one's correct. Anyway, um, the second one she's pretty certain was adopted and taken in by Hecate. Um, the second one she said had been kicked out. Um, Came out to his parents, thus got kicked out. Thank you, Bible Belt, for ruining people with a religion. And Leviticus talking about this doesn't mention women, only mentions men. And my father's thoughts on Leviticus is taking people across a desert safely. And the only reason you would mention men laying down with other men and not mention women laying down with other women is disease prevention. Most of Leviticus was disease prevention, Why don't you want to eat pork? You can't tell if it has spoiled or trichinosis. Why do you not eat shellfish? Because it might make you sick. Why do you put to death somebody who sleeps with an animal? Well, because they could be introducing an STD into the group, you know? Anyway, that was his theory. He had a lot more to it than just that, but Jesus was a God of love. He was not a God of hate. He was love your neighbor as yourself. Hey, I'm hanging out with prostitutes. Hey, I'm going to whip bankers and overturn tables in the temple. Jesus never said anything about somebody's sexual orientation. That was not part of his sermon. His sermons were love. Anyway, my dad was atheist, but he studied the Bible a lot because he worked with a lot of Christians and he liked to be able to refute them being hateful bigots. So anyway, this kid's parents kicked him out because they basically went to a church that preached hate instead of love. And so she was going to try and get him to stay with her for a few days and in the interim try and find some place for him to go. Zelda apparently, even though she came from the city, she made a lot of connections in the local towns. Not Carpe Noctem, notably. She doesn't mention Carpe Noctem much other than the fact that she avoids it. But she does mention a lot of the other towns that she visits. And the thing is, Carpe Noctem's the closest. It's the closest drive. So Zelda, the previous keeper of the woods, avoided the closest town nearby that has a lot of stores that are open during the day, even though everything has to be open all night long too, to go to other smaller towns. And I think that bears attention, um, because, you know, I think once we figure out this little mystery of Maddie Tremaine, and honestly, I'm hoping I run into her again so I can just ask her, hey, are you here because you want to be? Or are you here because you're being forced to? If you're here because you want to be, would you please take my phone and call your friends so they can stop worrying about you? You know? Um, we no longer live in a society where you can just disappear and people are not going to be upset about it. Anyway, so Zelda thinks that because he was living an unhappy life and felt so rejected that Hecate diverted him from going to Zelda's home and took him into her own. And, Hecate has said that Storm Woods is her home. That is where she hangs her hat, the entirety of it. So as soon as he stepped foot on the path, he was being guided to her. And, one of the things she said is, at least that's what I hope. This might be wishful thinking on my part. This might be me just hoping that nothing bad befell this young man because she saw a lot of talent in him. A lot, he was very artistic. Um, she found him in one of the towns painting a mural. Apparently, the shop owner okayed it, and it was gorgeous, and it was just a nature scene. One of the best things about Southern Illinois is it's gorgeous, you know. The wetlands have so many birds, and this town apparently was right near the Cache River, and the Cache River has like those cypress trees that are like thousands of years old, and a ton of birds. It's like apparently a birding destination. And so, this town nearby had a little cafe and had him paint a picture of a 1,000-year-old cypress tree, the wetlands, and some birds. And Zelda was so impressed and thought it was gorgeous. She was going to try and get him short-term places to stay locally, but she had some artist friends in New York and Chicago that she was going to reach out to with pictures of his work once she got permission from the kid. And, you know, she really thought she could set him up with some money quickly because his art was that good. Even if he only painted murals, she rattled off a list of names of people. I don't know why she'd write down the list of names in her journal, but she did. Maybe it was just, sometimes when something sad happens, we do weird things to soothe ourselves, but maybe it was like, no, I had all of these people that could help him. Maybe she did it in hopes that he'd be the next keeper of the woods. Who knows? I have no way of getting a hold of her. I have no idea where she went after working here, but by the time we arrived, there wasn't really anybody to hand off keys to. There was instructions via email, but there wasn't like an orientation or a trainer. So anyway, for all I know, Zelda's part of the horde. Who knows? But so Zelda was pretty much giving the first man a try to see if he was a decent human being. The second one she was trying to rescue. And so her hope in her journal, and Eli thinks it's probably what happened. And if I end up seeing Hecate in person again, I will ask her, hey, whatever happened to this kid? What happened to this guy? You know, she may not tell me, but it doesn't usually upset her if I ask a question. So, anyway, so yeah, Eli and I are formulating how we want to approach things. We're pretty sure we can go to a bar and pretend to be having drinks. Um, I want to go to the bar closest to where we were last time, just in case it wasn't the restaurant that Maddie Tremaine was at, but like a bar nearby. Um, but any town, going to the town hoping to run into somebody random, I mean, that's just not a good way to go about it. So I'm going to do some divination on it. And I may just break out a map of Carpe Noctem and see what pendulum work says to look at, just to narrow it down some. Um, and sometimes with the pendulum work, it sends you where you're supposed to be instead of where you want to be. So I may do some regular divination first. I may also ask for guidance. We'll see. But we want to prepare to go. Whereas I feel like the coven was basically like, well, we're just going to keep going until we run into her. And if they are bringing Augustina with them, I just really feel in my bones they'll never run into her. They're never going to run into Maddie as long as Augustina knows that they're going. And, she's going too. And again, I'm not going to intervene and tell them, hey, I think your friend's a narc, for a lack of a better way of saying that. I think she is, you know, not going to be a helpful presence in all of this. I am going to just keep my own counsel and have Eli and I do our own thing. And I don't even know if I'm going to tell the coven after the fact. Like, basically, unless I find Maddie, I don't know that I'm going to tell them anything. And even if I do find Maddie, if they insist on keeping Augustina in the loop, I'm just not going to say shit to them. Because why? If I feel like she's untrustworthy on this level, and if my instinct is correct and Maddie Tremaine has been kidnapped, that leads to very dangerous people. And again, it doesn't matter if they're vampires or larpers. Kidnappers are dangerous people. And dangerous people, especially when they're committing a federal crime, um, you know, tend to take threats seriously in a, hey, let's kill this person or disappear them kind of way. And since Eli and I work in Storm Woods, a woods that is notorious for people disappearing, you know, it would not be hard to make us disappear. And yes, that is paranoid, but I would rather be paranoid in this situation than not. And Eli's paranoid in most situations, so, we have that going for us, I guess. But yeah, I never thought taking a job in an out-of-the-way place would lead to this kind of thing. And to be real blunt, I'm not terribly happy about it. You know, I I I want to be left alone in the woods and do my own little thing and occasionally meet up with some witchy folk and do witchy things. But I think what I am getting from these interactions is, nope, I think I'm just gonna be a little hedge witch living in the woods, doing her own thing, who occasionally comes out from her hermit hole, interacts with people, then goes right back in. Because I don't trust them. And again, it's not about them being bad people or Augustina even being a bad person. They just don't pass the vibe check. There's something off with her. And yes, I'm extrapolating a lot from her getting lost on the path, but she was lost on the path for the duration of the meeting, and they were with me for hours upon hours upon hours. I helped them plan out a lot of stuff. So that's a long time to be wandering around the woods by yourself on a path you can't get off of. There's no way for me to not take that as a warning, you know? And the woods here are alive. I go out walking at night because I am a witch and the night belongs to me. I go out walking at night, I leave my offerings, and the entire woods around me feels alive. It feels like I am making an offering to the woods itself. There are times where if I get spooked or something, I can feel protected and hidden in the woods in a way that I wouldn't in a town or a city. It has an energy. Uh, Remember when we went to Arkansas and dug up crystals and how any little ritual we did there just felt so much more real and so much more focused? And maybe that was, you know, the placebo effect. We know that we're standing on top of a whole bunch of crystals, and we know that crystals work to focus energy and all of that. So maybe it was the placebo effect. But with Storm Woods, it's like that times a million. You know, um, it feels like when I visualize a shield around me, that I'm not visualizing it. I could see it. I can touch it. And Eli has expressed similar, and for a Christian boy to be saying that, although he's always loved the woods and the energy of the woods, so maybe not. But he feels the same way with the work that he does, because he does protective work too. There's a lot of witchcraft and Christianity that overlap. People want to make the two separate, but they're really not. Um, Especially if it's Catholicism. But that's a horse of a different color. My whole point is the energy of the woods makes all of the magic feel more real, feel more potent, and instead of the visualization, it is almost real to the touch. And what I need to do, now that I've said that out loud, is I need to do some magic and see if Eli can see it as I'm doing it, or if it's just me seeing it, And either way, I think it's cool. But the woods is alive and has a very definitive energy to it and seems protective of me in the same way that Eli and I are protecting the woods. We're there to make sure no harm comes to the woods. That's pretty much our purpose. And therefore, when we're out and about in the woods make sure no harm comes to us. We're also not stupid about it, We aren't breaking any of the rules of the woods. We're leaving out the offerings the way we're supposed to. We're staying on the path the way that we're supposed to. If there were an injured animal off the path, I'd be there in a second to help. But unless there is that kind of an emergency, the path goes all over the place. And sometimes it's wide, sometimes it's thin, and it's always filled with beauty. So if the woods deemed somebody as not worthy of getting to my house, I'm trusting the woods because I know the woods better than I know these women. And, you know, we can have somebody in our midst that we trust, that we love, and they're betraying us the whole time. It's happened in many covens. It's happened to many people. And sometimes that betrayal is just, hey, I'm sleeping with your husband. Sometimes that betrayal is, I've been talking trash about you behind your back for years. But the number of times I have seen people who thought they were friends with somebody when that somebody just deep down hated them. I've lost count. I've lost count. Um, that stopped happening to me after a certain while because I started being a lot pickier about who I let into my world, which is why I'm holding my ground on this one. Augustina is bad. I feel it. The woods feels it. Eli agrees. And that's 3 points making a straight line. I'm not gonna truck with it. So anyway, Eli, of course, takes forever to plan this kind of thing with. He wants to cover all bases. He wants to have an escape route. He would really like to have somebody, able to bail us out, but there's nobody close by that we trust that we can do that with. We're going to have to, magic ourselves up a bit before we go in. Um, he has a couple crosses he's going to make into amulets or talismans, um, with his, Christian boy magic. And I have a couple things I'm gonna do too. So anyway, I don't know if I will have more to report to you about this next week or not. Um, but hey, at least we're not talking about the weather, right? I thought once we moved here, all I would be able to say is, my, what pretty trees. And I wouldn't have much new to report other than, hey, I saw a woodpecker today, or hey, my bird watch list is growing. We do have binoculars, and my bird watch list is growing. I have seen so many recently, but, that is nowhere near as interesting as, hey, the vampires might be kidnapping people. Oh, my friend, what is my life? Anyway, more next week, when I have another chunk of time off to leave you a lengthy message. For whatever reason, when I'm in the tower, I can't really leave messages. I kind of wonder if that's why Zelda had a journal, you know? I wonder if it were any place else. Like, we have Wi-Fi, but recorded messages sound weirdly garbled. I found that out the other day as I tried to leave a recorded message for Eli, and he was just like, yeah, that did not work. So we played around with it and found that, nope, everything there's really garbled. Internet runs great though, so no idea what that's about. Anyway, um, so I have to wait until I have time off and I'm not up in the tower. And honestly, we're supposed to be working shifts there, but we spend most of our time up there. It's really pretty, it's really peaceful. We can hang out and talk with each other. So anyway, I hope that all is well in your world and that you are doing as well as can be expected in these trying times. And I will talk to you next week.